this particular chapter very easy, and working on PHP classes and objects is very similar to C++ or Java, if you are aware about those programming. Okay. PHP classes and objects. So PHP is a full-fledged object-oriented language with many of syntactic constructs popularized in languages like Java and C++. Earlier versions of PHP do not support all those object-oriented. The support for the object-oriented programming started from version 5 and above. The notion of programming with objects allows the developer think about an item with a particular properties, okay, also called as attributes or data members, and methods or functions. Basically, when we talk about an object is nothing but which has an attribute, and there are certain functions or the methods. One example is you can think of a car. That is a classic example. If we have a car class, the car class attributes, what are the attributes for the car class? Like a color, type of the engine, then number of seats. So those are the different attributes about that particular car. And what are the different functions a car can do? A car can accelerate, car can brake, then car can go in reverse direction. So those are the different functions of the that particular car. So once you have this car class, that is a blueprint. Every class should have color. Every class means every car should have a color, type of engine, number of seats. Those attributes should be there, and every car should be able to move forward, then move in the reverse direction. It should be able to accelerate. It should be able to brake. Those are the functionality. So that blueprint, that is called as a class. Using this blueprint class, you create the physical object. Okay, you will create a car, maybe with the color as a red color, and the type is like engine type is V4, V6, whatever the engine type, and then it has all the functions of a movement. So that is called as the object. So object is when you instantiate a particular class, then it becomes a object. The structure of these objects is defined by classes. So how the objects structure is, it will have based on whatever the class defines the attributes. When the class is the color attribute, when you create the object will have a value for that particular attribute. Okay, so basically class is a blueprint and object is a physical structure that is created using that particular blueprint. Okay, the structure of these objects is defined by classes which outline the properties and methods like a blueprint. Each variable created from a class is called as an object. So you can use the word variable, okay, whichever from that particular class, if you create the variable, that is nothing but the object, or it is also called as an instance. Each object maintains its own set of variables and behaves largely independently from the class once created. So once the object is created, it will have its own set of variables. So from a class you create an object, okay, you create one car with the blue color and another car with a red color. The blue color object, it has its own set of data inside, variables and methods, and the blue car has its own set. So they are independent. Another example is a book. Book is a class. What does book has? It defines the properties such as, sorry. Okay, example, book class, it will have a title. What is called as a book? Anything which has a title, author, content, number of pages with the content, it is called as a class. That is the blueprint. Using this blueprint, when you create the actual objects. These are the objects which has the exact title, which has a author, and it has number of pages with the content. So these are called as the objects. Using this blue book class, you can create multiple objects with different attributes, right? So these are the example. Object or an instance of the book class. Each instance has its own title, author, and number of pages. Pages, property values. Those are the values. Everything will be distinct. Once you create an object, then it will have its own values for the whatever the attributes that are defined in the class. UML, Unified Modeling Language, to represent the design, object-oriented design. This comes up with a UML, comes with a standard. So according to that standard, we represent the particular classes. Class diagrams and object diagrams in particular are useful to us when describing the properties, methods, and relationship between the classes and the objects. What the this UML diagram will give, it will tell about the what are the attributes it has, what are the different methods, if there is any relation between other classes. All those information can be read using that UML diagrams. So here is an example. Artist is the class, and inside the artist we have first name, last name, birth date, birth city, and the death date. Using objects, we can encapsulate those properties together into a class definition of an artist. So we'll see how the first is the UML design for that. So this is the how we can represent that particular class, whatever the class you saw. Artist is the class, and these are the attributes that particular class has. You can see this is how it is represented using a rectangular box with a top rectangular box giving the class name. You specify the class name, and here you give the all the attributes or the properties or data members, whatever you want to call them. So you will list all the properties, and you will specify what is the data type of those properties. For example, name is string, last name is string, birth date is a date, and so on. And this particular symbol indicates the accessibility. Accessibility in the sense whether that particular property is public or private or protected. Those are the things that we can represent. So plus represents for the public. It says that this class, the name of the class is artist. It has these 5 attributes, and the each attribute it tells what data type it is and what kind of a accessibility, whether it is a public or private or protected. Now using this class, we have created 2 objects. This is one object, this is second object. The first object, dollar Picasso. So in terms of PHP, you can think it as a variable or it is an object. So dollar Picasso, that is how we use the variable in PHP. You can think it as a variable, but if it is a creating a object of particular class, then it will have a reference to that particular class object. The dollar Picasso is the object name, and this particular object has the property first name as Pablo, last name. So each of these properties will have certain values. So you can see the values. So another object has been created using the same class, and the name of that object is dollar Dali, and it has the value for each of those property, first name Salvador, last name Dali, and so on. All the values are assigned for each of those attributes. So this is how you can represent using the UML diagram with different levels of information. So this, if you just give a rectangular box that represents the name of the class, the second one you can see here, it tells about the name of the class and attributes. What are the different attributes that are present in this particular class? This particular representation, it tells about the class name and the different attributes that are present in that class with the accessibility, what kind of accessibility we have on each of those attributes. The third one is you have the class name, and you have a attributes, and you are telling what type of attributes are those, means what type of a data you are going to store in them. And last one is the, it is complete details. It gives the name of the class, list of attributes, accessibility, and what their data types. Okay. Server and desktop objects. Okay, so in case of when objects are created, when it is created on the desktop, so the object will remain there on the particular desktop, and it can be used for the used by the multiple users. But in case of a server object, whenever the http request starts, okay, whatever is the life of that http request, the life of the object is also bound by that particular life. So you will not have a object which will be there for ever. So whenever you have a http request, you do certain process and you create certain objects on the server side. The minute that http response is given, that object will be removed. Okay. While desktop softwares can load an object into memory and make use of its several user interactions, PHP object is loaded into memory only for the life of that HTTP request. So it will be there for only that particular HTTP request. We must use classes differently than the desktop world, since the object must be recreated and loaded into memory. So because of the lifespan of the objects on the desktop and the server is different, we must use them differently. We cannot use it as we use it on the desktop. Unlike the desktop, there are potentially many thousands of users making requests at once. So only are the objects destroyed upon responding to each request, but memory must be shared between many simultaneous requests, each of which may load objects into a memory, and each request that requires it. So what it says is, like, unlike desktop, we might be having most of the time, if it is a desktop, it is a single user, right? But in case of a web applications, thousands of users will be accessing. So we will be creating a lot of objects. Whenever there is a http request, we will be creating those objects. Whenever the response is given, the object will be removed. So even though we are creating many objects with each request, these objects are created on a shared memory. Okay, so whenever response is given, that particular objects will be removed from that shared memory. So this is the pictorial example. Desktop application, you can see we have one object created, and many applications are using that particular object. But in case of a web applications, browser application, so this is a request A, object is created. Request B, another object is created. Request C, another object. For each HTTP request, we are going to create a object. Okay, and this would be on the shared server memory. Okay. Now we understood about very brief about the object-oriented programming with relation with the PHP. Now we'll see how we can define the classes. And if you see the structure, it looks very similar to the Java programming. If you want to define a class, the syntax is defining class uses the class keyword. We have to use the class keyword followed by the name of the class, what name you want to give, and then a pair of curly braces. Inside the pair of curly braces, you are going to list all the attributes and all the methods. So this is class artist, open curly brace, closing curly brace. Inside I have whatever was defined in the UML. Representation UML diagram. This is how we write the PHP code. So you'll say keyword class space name of the class, open curly brace, closing curly brace. Inside that, I will have all the data types, and you can see public, the accessibility is public. So anybody can, whoever has access to the object can access any attributes, any of these attributes. So dollar first name colon, dollar last name colon, and so on. Next is instantiating a object. How do we instantiate? Similar to Java, we use the keyword new. Okay, so Defining a class is not same as it using it. To make use of a class, one must instantiate a or create an object from definition using the new keyword. So if we just create the class, that is, we will not be that will be just in the memory as a class. If you want to create the object, then what you have to do is using the new keyword, you can create the class, create the object. How to do that? uh, Object variable, any variable name is equal to new, and you will say the class name followed by the empty parenthesis and semicolon. So this will create a new object, and it will provide the reference to the Picasso. So this Picasso variable will be pointing to this particular object. Similarly, if I want to create one more object of artist class, same thing, another variable or the object name is equal to new artist, empty braces followed by the semicolon. This is how we are going to create it. Properties. Okay, once you have instances of an object, you can access and modify the properties of each one separately using a variable name and arrow. Okay, so how you can use, it's a arrow key. Arrow key is nothing but it is a hyphen and the greater than symbol. Together it will forms as a arrow key. So first step is you will create the object. How to do that? It is the first statement. You will use the new keyword, and you will give the name of the class followed by the empty parenthesis followed by the semicolon. Then another variable or the another object you will create. Now how to access the properties? To access the properties, we use the arrow key. Now we have this object variable dollar Picasso, arrow key, and first name. So what this will do is it will give a access to the property first name of this object. And if you want to modify it, you can either access it or you can modify it. So in this case, particular case, they are assigning a value. The Pablo value is being assigned to that particular attribute. Similarly, you can see the last name, birth city, birth date. That is how for this particular object they are setting the values. Constructors. What is a constructor is whenever you instantiate an object, a constructor is called immediately. That is the first thing that will be called. Constructor is nothing but it is a method. And how you can use the constructor is if you want to have a different way of instantiating an object. For example, in this particular case, we instantiated the object without passing any parameter. Okay, so it will call the empty constructor, so where it will do nothing. If you want to have a constructor, basically you can use it for the initialization. Let us say instead of creating the object like this, I will assign the all these values as the parameters. So 1 2 3 4 5. So I will give the 5 parameters. So inside the constructor, I will be able to access those values and initialize these values. So when that particular methodology will be useful, suppose let us say your properties are they are private. It is not accessible like this outside the particular class. Then you can use that particular method. So you can have different ways of instantiating. Either you can use empty or with one parameter, two parameter, three parameter using the constructors. Constructors let you specify parameters during instantiation to initialize the properties within a class right way. In PHP, constructors are defined as functions, very similar to Java programming. Okay, with the name like this underscore underscore construct with the empty bracket. So this is how the in case of a PHP we define the constructor. Notice that in the constructor, each parameter is assigned to an internal class variable using $this. Okay. So if you remember in case of a Java programming, we have the pointer this. What this will do is in particular case of PHP $this will point to the object which has been instantiated. So it will have a reference to that particular object. You must always use $this syntax to reference all properties and methods associated with the particular instance of a class. So you have to use the $this to reference all the attributes or the parameter, all the attributes or the members of the particular class. So here is the example of the constructor. So this is the class artist, and there are other attributes as we saw earlier. Then I have included a constructor. So function underscore underscore construct. This is how I will create a constructor, and it takes parameters 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, dollar death, and by if it is not passed by default, it will be assigned a null value. And once you get all these values, what you will do is you will access each of these properties. These properties are defined here. You will access them inside the constructor using the $this and the arrow key. $this arrow key, first name, this is first attribute, and you will assign whatever the values that has been passed to the constructor. That value will be assigned to this attribute. The second value is assigned to the second attribute, and so on. So this is how we are going to create a new object by using that constructor. So $Picasso is equal to new artist. Inside the parenthesis, you can see the value. We are passing the value of Pablo, Picasso. So all this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 5 attributes are there. You are passing a 5 values. So the first name is set to Pablo. So how it will be? The minute in PHP, this particular statement is executed. Whenever new artist is executed, what happens is first it will call the constructor. Okay. Okay. First it will call this constructor, and these values are passed. Whatever the values are given here, those values are passed to the this particular constructor, the Pablo. The Pablo will be assigned to the first name, and so on, all those values. And when you have this instruction getting executed in the PHP, whenever again new artist is called, a new object is new object is created, and the constructor is called with these values. Okay, these values are passed to the constructor, so all the properties will have these values. Methods or functions, whatever you want to call, methods are like functions, except they are associated with a class. So methods or they are nothing but the functions only. Only difference is like these methods are associated with a class. They are bound inside the class, and you can specify the accessibility for those methods as well. They define the task each instance of a class can perform and are useful since they associate behavior with the object. So here we created a new object using the new artist, and we pass the parameters, and inside the Picasso we have a method called as output as a table. So we will see this how this function is written. So if you want to access that particular method, what you will do, you will give the name of the object $Picasso, use the arrow similar to similar way to the you are accessing the attributes. The same way you will access the methods also using the arrow key, and you call that particular function. Okay, if there are parameters, you will pass the parameters, otherwise empty parenthesis and followed by the semicolon. So this is okay. There are other attributes. Okay, just they have given the function implementation, the method public. So I told you each of this method can have in those accessibility, either public, private, or protected. So this particular one is a public. That is how we are able to access here. So after creating the object, we are able to access that method. If this is a private, then we will not be able to do this. This would have been this will give the error when you are trying to execute. Public function output as a table. So whatever the information that is set, means whatever the values are set for each of those attribute, we are calling this method which will display as a table. So this code is nothing but it will display as a table. Dollar table is equal to this table HTML tag. Then next one is dollar table dot is equal to, you remember dot is equal to is like the operator plus is equal to. Whenever you have the plus is equal to, suppose you have a plus is equal to 1, that means what, a is equal to a plus 1. So the statement is dollar table dot is equal to means dollar table is equal to dollar table dot this string. Basically you are concatenating. So concatenating with what, concatenating with the table. So next would be table row, and table header column span is 2, and for that you are concatenating dollar this first name. The first name you are giving it as a value, then you are concatenating with the last name. So table header will have the first name and the last name, and this is the row, end of the row. Okay, there are two th values. One is the first name, second one is the last name. Next one is this, everything is getting concatenated, okay, as a single table. Next is we have next row, and td is birth, and next td you are giving the birth date, and uh, birth date, and inside after the birth date, inside the bracket you are giving the birth city, and you are closing that td. Only two tds are there. One is birth, second one is the birth date, and inside birth city, and you are closing that row. And next you are opening the third row, and you have a text in one cell, death, and in the next cell you have the date, and you are closing that particular row, and you are closing that particular table, and you are returning this table. If we whichever is the calling program, then it will display it on the browser. Basically what, how many rows are there? There are 3 rows. On the first row you have the first name, last name, okay, and we are using the column span as 2, so it will span over 2 columns. In the next row I have birth, birth date is there inside the bracket, birth city is there. In the third row we have 2 cells. First cell has a text death, and the second cell has the date, actual date of the death. Okay, if you write the UML class diagram, this is how it will look like. Artist, first in the first rectangular box you will have the name of the class. Second rectangular block you will have the attributes, all the attributes listed with their data type and also accessibility. In the third rectangular box you will list out all the methods. One is the artist. This is nothing but it's a constructor. We have a constructor. Just now we saw, whenever you are having a constructor you will give the same name as the class name in a representation of the UML. Okay, and we have one more method, output as a table, which doesn't take any parameter, which returns a string, and it is a public. So this is one way of representation. This is another way. So this is in case of Java and many other programming. What they do is whatever is the class name, they use the same name for the constructor. That is how it is same name here. In case of a PHP, the constructor is always underscore underscore construct with whatever the parameters it is passing. Visibility. The visibility of a property or method determines the accessibility of the class member and can be set to. Okay, the visibility can be public, private, and protected. If you set a particular attribute or the method as public, whoever has access to that particular object reference, they can access those attributes. How to access that? The object name, arrow, and the attribute or the method. That is how, if it is a public. If it is a private, the attribute or method can be accessed only inside the class. You cannot access it outside. Suppose you create an object and you try to reference the private members, whether it is a attribute or a method, you will get an error. And protected, this you will see it in the inheritance. Protected members will be only available for the derived classes. Whichever are the derived classes, they will have the access. So public, the property or method is accessible to any code that has a reference to the object. Private, sets as a method or a variable to only be accessible from within the class, only inside the class. Wherever you are defining, it will be accessible only there. Protected is it is accessible inside the class and inside the derived classes or the subclasses. This is an example code. So first we will see here, this is the class definition. Excuse me, class definition. Class, name of the class is painting, opening curly brace, closing curly brace. I have two properties here or attributes. First one is dollar title, which is a public, dollar profit, which is a private. So dollar title is accessible from anywhere. Whoever has access to this object, they will be able to access. And dollar profit is only accessible inside this class. So inside this class, whichever methods, whatever the methods they are present, they can without any problem they can access this. But outside the class, this particular attribute will not be accessible. And I have one method here, public function do this, and no parameters, empty parenthesis, open curly brace and closing curly brace for this particular method. What I am doing, dollar $a is equal to dollar this profit. So I can access any public or private or protected inside the class. So any you write any functions, those functions will have access to all the properties irrespective of what is the accessibility. Dollar $b is equal to dollar this title. It is also accessible because it is a public accessibility is there. And dollar $c is equal to dollar this. We are calling a method. The method name is do secret that. Do secret that, if you go here, it is a private function. So even though it's a private function, it is accessible inside the class. So all the public, private, protected will be accessible inside anywhere in the class. So without any problem, you can access. Now, here is the code piece. Within some PHP page or within some other class, I am creating a object. $p1 is equal to new painting. Okay, object of this class is created and reference is given in the $p1. Then what I am doing, $x is equal to $p arrow title. So this is a public, it is accessible, so there is no issue with that. Now $y is equal to $p1 arrow profit, that is not allowed. Okay, you will get an error because dollar profit is only accessible inside the class, it is not accessible outside. That is how we do the protection of the data inside a particular object. $p1, it is trying to call using arrow do this method. Do this method. Okay, it is a public method, it can call this, and inside this method we are accessing the private. That is all right, there is no issue with that. But whatever you are calling method from here, that should be public. Next one is $p1 arrow do secret that. This is not allowed. Why it is not allowed? Because it is a private. Okay. Now how we represent it with a UML diagram. This is the name of the class painting. These are the two attributes, title and profit. Plus represents for the public, minus represents for the private. Similarly, next one, method do this method is a public, and do secret that is a that is also method with the accessibility of private. Next, static members. Static members concept is similar to Java. Static members, they belong to the class, they don't belong to any particular instance, whether it is a static attribute or static method, they belong to the class, they do not belong to the object. The same concept is used here. A static member is a property or the method that all the instances of class share. All the instances of a class share means they are common for all the objects. So any object you create, the static members will remains the same. If you have set some value, it will remain same for all the objects. Unlike an instance property where each object get its own value for the property, there is only one value for the class static property. So instance property means what? Example is, these are the instance properties, title and profit. Those when you have the instance properties, for each object you will have a one value for them, but for the static properties you will only have one for the class. Static members use the self colon colon. This is how we are going to access self colon colon syntax, and are not associated with one object. They can be associated without any instance of an artist object by using the class name, that is via artist colon colon and dollar artist count. This is very similar to your Java programming. Suppose if you have any static member, without instantiating the object, you can directly access those static members just giving the name of the class dot static members. The same pattern is used here also. This is an example of a class containing a static member. So this is a static member, dollar artist count, it is set as 0, and this static is the keyword. Whenever this keyword is used, that particular member will become a static member, and public is the access key. Similarly, it will have the access key, public, private, and the protected. Other members are exactly the same. We have a constructor, additional constructor. Inside the constructor, you can see the parameters that we are sending is the same 5 attributes I am sending, and we are assigning those values to these attributes. And at the end, you can see self colon colon, self colon. Whenever you want to access the static member, you have to use self colon colon. Whenever you want to access the instance members, you have to use dollar this and the arrow key. So self colon colon dollar artist count plus plus. So now what happens is, initial value is 0. When you create the object, okay, using the new method, you will pass the values, you will create it. What will happen is, initial value is 0, it will increment. So this will it will call the constructor. Once it calls the constructor, it will assign all these values, and it will increment this value will become 1 the minute you create the first object. When you create the second object, you will pass different values. All these values are different, those values will be assigned to that particular object attributes, and again this will be incremented. Earlier it was 1, it will become 2. The third object 3, 4, 5. So this is a way we can get a count of the how many objects being created. So for that, if there is any need to know how many objects are created, you can use like this as a static member. So this is the same example what I explained. This is the class. I created the object, first object. Okay. Now you can see the self colon colon dollar artist count. This particular variable is the same. It will reference to this only. Okay. And this is another object. This value will also reference to the same. And what is that reference? That is nothing but the artist colon colon dollar artist count. When we are making changes to this particular value, okay, anywhere inside all the objects, that same value will get reflected. Okay, so there is only one copy of that, but however the other reference variable, there are multiple values. So you can say the first name is Pablo in this object, the first name is Salvador in this particular object. But if this artist count is 10, it will be same here also. If there are 100 objects, every object will have this artist count as a value of 100, because it is going to reference to the same variable, which is artist colon colon dollar artist count, which is a static variable or a static member. So we can use the constant values can be stored more efficiently as a class constants, so long as they are not calculated or updated. They are added to class using a const keyword. So this is how we can create the constant variables. Const, this is the name of the variable. The standard is normally they use the uppercase letters when they are creating the constant. A value is assigned here. Unlike all other variables, constant don't use the dollar symbol when declaring or using them. So if you see here, if we are declaring other normal variables, we say dollar and the name of the variable. So we don't use the dollar here. Const is the keyword, and then you use the any name that will become the constant variable name, and you store the values. And this is true when you are accessing them also. Okay, accessed both inside and outside the class. So this is in the class, this is outside the class. Inside the class, how you are going to use self colon colon, and you will give the name of the constant. And suppose if you are accessing from the outside of the class, you will give the class reference, okay, not the object reference. Class reference is name of the class, colon colon, and name of the constant if you are accessing outside the class. Okay, next one is the object-oriented design. So in this object-oriented design, we are going to talk about the flavors of the object-oriented programming, that is data encapsulation, inheritance, and the polymorphism. How data encapsulation is implemented, how polymorphism is implemented, how inheritance can be done in a PHP program. We'll see that in the next class.